Hello there, my dear. How are you? I hope that you are having a fantastic day wherever it is in the world and whatever day, time that this message is finding you. My name is Sabrina Militello. I am a coach, the owner of Empower Her Life and Performance Coaching. And I really want us to dive into this conversation today from a very vulnerable place, if I'm allowed to say that. I want to share with you some of my personal experience in this area specifically to help you shift out of this. Because when we're talking about emotional eating, we're talking about beating emotional eating. I want you to understand what emotional eating actually is. I think so often I struggled in this area because I thought it was helping me. I really thought that binge eating, emotionally eating, kind of diving into snack foods and that kind of way of behaving was comforting me. It was my self-care time. It was something that I got to treat myself with, and I didn't understand it for what it was. I have lost over 100 pounds, sitting right around 104 pounds at the moment. It's heading down again, but I haven't weighed myself for quite a while. I tend not to do that. It's a big trigger for me. But I've lost over 100 pounds and I've healed my emotional eating. I've healed my relationship with food because I understood what was actually happening. I started to understand what was actually happening. And that empowered me to start making some different choices. I developed an eating disorder when I was at university. After I gained 100 pounds at university, I was in a desperate mode to lose that weight. And so I started doing very desperate things, abusing my body, abusing my relationship with food. It was a very tumultuous, hard, difficult, traumatic period of my life because of what I shared with you at the beginning, that I was using food as a way to cope, as a way to numb, as a way to self-care. And it's funny because there's something that I came across after I'd kind of navigated all of that and I'd lost the weight and dealt with all of that. My emotional eating was still something that would pull me back during hard seasons of life. And I came across a quote, gosh, it must have been 5 or 6 years ago, so recent in this whole story. And it said, do not confuse your self-sabotage for self-care. And I'm wondering if that quote just hit you in the stomach in the way it did me. It literally was like pow, and I was, oh my gosh. Do not confuse your self-sabotage for self-care. And I realized that that's what I had been doing all those years. For all those years, I was sabotaging my progress. I was sabotaging my belief that I could lose this weight. I was sabotaging the process of my weight loss system that I had kind of fallen into. I was sabotaging any ability to transcend beyond these behaviors that were keeping me so stuck, so small, so dependent, and incredibly unhealthy. So the question of how to overcome emotional eating, I have a very simple one-word answer for you that is gonna equally trigger you and set you free. It's gonna equally trigger you and set you free. Are you ready? The one-word answer for how to overcome emotional eating for good is heal. Heal. You have to heal the pieces within you that are so fractured that abusing yourself feels like the only way for you to cope. Even saying those words kind of gets something stuck in my throat and it makes me feel a certain kind of way because I know how difficult this is. I know that this is the thing that a lot of women struggle with. This is the thing. I can think of a handful of my clients that I'm working with right now that this is the cross that they're dying on, right? Is that the emotions keep pulling them back into binge eating, like a destructive cycle and a destructive pattern around food. Because when a negative emotion comes up, or a particular trigger, whether that be a person or a situation or a circumstance or an emotion comes up, this is what they do. They numb, they hide, they cope, they retreat into food. And it feels as if that cycle is impossible to break out of. And it feels like that cycle is impossible to break out of because it is, until you allow yourself to heal from the trigger. When that thing happens, you have to understand what it is that you're making that thing mean. Did you hear me? You have to understand what it is that you're making that thing mean, because a trigger is only a trigger when it elicits a certain behavior, right? So when something happens and you instantly respond in this particular way, it's because that thing makes you feel a certain way. But it's not the thing, it's your interpretation of the thing. Can we understand that? It's not what happens, it's what you make it mean. That is what triggers the behavior. The thing happens, you attach a meaning to it, which floods your body with certain emotions, and those emotions dictate the action of emotionally eating, binge eating, numbing, hiding, coping, all of those things. So in order to overcome emotional eating for good, you have to identify what you're attaching to that trigger, what you're making it mean about yourself, your worth, your value, what other people think of you, whatever that may be. For me, it was my worth. For me, whenever something went wrong, I had an argument with my husband, or my boss treated me a certain way, or family treated me a certain way, or I had a particular, verbal disagreement with a friend or a family member. And I grew up in a very tumultuous household where my family dynamic is trash. So you can imagine that it was a daily trigger to have these kinds of altercations, if you want to put it that way, with people. And I attached my worth to how other people treated me, saw me, spoke to me, what they thought about me. And so every time my worth was placed under question, what I made it mean, or what I then went to was, well, you're trash anyway, nobody cares about you anyway, you're not worth this anyway, so go and shove your face into those donuts and those chips and just numb out, right? So, and it wasn't what was happening, it's what I made it mean. I need you to really get that it's an attachment theory, right? And the thing about our brains is they want things to make sense. Our brain wants to attach meaning to everything. And so we fall into this trap of attaching emotion and meaning to certain people, situations, certain things, and then we behave in response to the emotion. So in order to overcome your emotional eating and do so for good, you have to give yourself permission to heal. And giving yourself permission to heal requires, listen to the word, requires you to feel the emotion that you're feeling. And that's the piece of it, isn't it? Because emotional eating so often is to numb, is to cope, is to retreat into ourselves, it's to hide. We don't have to feel that thing for however long you're engaged in that behavior, because you're flooding your body with sugar and like the endorphins, and it feels really good in the moment because it tastes really good in the moment, and you're watching something mindless on TV while you're doing it, so you are literally checked out of your life. It feels great in the moment, but when it's done, did that actually do anything for you, or has it further diminished your sense of self, your sense of worth, your sense of identity, and your health overall? So in order to overcome emotional eating for good, you have to give yourself permission to heal. And in order to heal, you have to be willing to experience your emotions. This is part of what being a grown-up is. And I don't mean to say that in a dismissive way, but the difference between children and adults is literally how we interact and respond to our emotions. Children have tantrums. Children, you know, throw their toys out of the pram. There's a literal British saying that is that. So throwing your toys out of the pram is having a tantrum, right? When you have something bad happen, children respond to it in a way where they cry, they yell, they scream, they become immovable. That's how they respond. As a grown-up, you engaging in emotional eating is you having that internal tantrum. So how can you actually show up in your grown-ass adult space and feel and process your emotions in a healthy way in order for you to be able to move through them and no longer diminish yourself and your health in order to hide from them? That's the big question. I've got so much more that I can say about this topic because, like I said, this is my lived experience. There's so much more that goes into this about the willingness to feel your emotions and the willingness to work through the things and the willingness to kind of be re-triggered in a lot of ways from traumatic things that may have happened to you. There's so much more that goes into this, but for kind of this overarching understanding how to overcome your emotional eating for good, heal. I hope this served you. If you have any questions or you want me to do more videos on this topic, just write in the comments there specifically, maybe things that you want me to dive into. I'd be more than happy to. Give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing to my channel if you think it serves you. I would love that. And you always have the ability to come check out my social media, dive into my DMs and us to have a further conversation about some of these topics. Because I think this intention of growth is so important. It's so valuable, and it's something that I want you to recognize that you are invested in already. Do you know how few people do that? How few people are invested in growing and learning and expanding and transcending? It's not many. For you, it seems normal because you engage in this kind of content all the time, but it's incredibly rare. So I want to acknowledge you for that and encourage you to continue to do the work. If there's anything else that you want me to talk about on this topic of emotional eating or anything else in general, just let me know. I'll be happy to create some content for you around that. All right, have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you soon.